Welcome to a replay of one of our many excellent talks from Secure Southwest 15, and thanks again to our sponsors Securious, C3IA, CrowdStrike and the British Computer Society, and most importantly our prime sponsor the UK Government Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport.
The final session from this morning, before we break for lunch, is with Sakine and Mark, who are joining us today to talk about secure multi-party computation for secure lifecycle assessment. And I'll hand over to you, Sakine.
Thank you. It's working with this one. Okay. Hi, first of all, thank you for inviting us. I'm really honored to represent our work in this event. My name is Sakine Yalman. I am a third-year PhD student at the University of Exeter, and my supervisor is Professor Dr. Achim Brucker. Today, I would like to present our work, Secure Multi-Party Computation for Secure Life Cycle Assessments. The flow of business... Oops. Sorry. Yeah. The flow of business in the global and competitive environment is made via supply chain because companies and firms are not individually self-educate. What supply chain is that? It is a set of processes and entities which are interested to fulfill a customer order, and it involves various kinds of companies such as manufacturers, suppliers, retailers, distributors, and customers. And to determine the environmental impact of products becomes an increasingly important factor in buying decisions of customers, and it is also a growing concern of lawmakers. Therefore, companies have an increased interest in determining the ecological footprint of their products. So, life cycle assessment is a methodology for assessing the environmental impact associated with all the stages of the life cycle of a commercial product, process, or service. On the right side, you can see two examples of that. They represent the carbon footprint of the products. It is well known that sharing information within collaborative business processes like supply chain can be very beneficial. However, it can also reveal trade secrets. And determining the ecological footprint of products also requires sharing information between partners in the supply chain. Therefore, this security and privacy concerns are preventing the close collaboration within supply chain, and also it limits the achieving better life cycle assessment of products. Today, LCA is not usually computed in real time and neither is using actual production data. It's generally computed offline and using historic values based on exemplary measurements. But with the rise of Internet of Things, LCA can be based on actual sensor data, and it can improve the real time part of it. But while an LCA based on actual production data can be highly desirable from an ecological perspective, still due to the risk of sharing data within supply chain, LCA can reveal confidential data about production processes as well as business relationships between partners in a supply chain. Companies still not willing to share their data necessary for LCA based on sensor data. Of course, there are some privacy-preserving techniques that support computations over private data without revealing secrets, such as secure multi-party computation and homomorphic encryption. But using these existing privacy-preserving techniques naively are not well suitable for smart devices because of the performance, storage, and resource constraints. In traditional LCA, we need to compute matrix operations that requires input from everybody in the supply chain. And if we turn to the system using some methods secure to computation, like secure multi-party computation, we will have a big system with a lot of participants and complex computations. So we developed a model for ensuring confidentiality in life cycle assessment. And instead of, in contrast to traditional LCA, we make one-level aggregation, so local computations in a recursive way that ensures the confidential data of partners in the supply chain. We divided parties into subgroups depending on their relationships and their level in the supply chain. And then we made a secure multi-party computation into these subgroups separately. So in our case, we compute small group of matrices and we have more lightweight computations. So how are we ensuring confidentiality and security? With dividing LCA into subgroups, we prevent the companies to learn the relationships between other companies in the supply chain. For certificate authorization, in each local computation, we have certificate authorization. So this is protecting from outside attacks in the supply chain. For preventing the disclosure of companies' confidential data, we use secure multi-party computation. As I said before, why we cannot apply secure multi-party computation into traditional LCA naively, because of the complexity of formula being computed and the number of companies involved in the supply chain. So with our idea, with splitting up, we made formula simpler and we reduced the number of companies involved in the computation. Oops. Can we go back? Yeah, please. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So our approach is not only improving the security and privacy, but also enhancing the performance. We evaluated the performance of our LCA prototype with using some benchmarking. We generated and ran 3 different test scenarios. The first one is a balance tree. Each company in this tree has 2 direct suppliers, only companies that in the last level has no supplier. And the growth, the depth of the tree grow logarithmic with the number of companies involved in the supply chain. The second one is the linear list. In here, actually, it is growing linearly with depending on how many number of companies in there. Each company has 1 supplier with no further supplier and 1 supplier that has 2 direct supplier again. The last one is a flat supply chain. Actually, it has just 1 consumer company and N-1 suppliers. The reason that we have chosen these 3 scenarios that they are representing edge cases for us. The first one, balanced binary tree, allows the maximum degree of parallelism in the supply chain. And each computation, if they place in the same level, they can be executed parallel. The second one actually behaves opposite, that each local computation needs to wait for each other. The last one, actually, we used this to study the impact of the different number of supplier in direct application of secure multi-party computation-based LCA. Next slide, please. Can we go back? Oops. Thank you. So this diagram shows the runtime results for our test scenarios. As you can see, the balance tree grows logarithmic with the number of companies involved. This is strong evidence that running local LCS parallel works well. The linear list grows more linearly. The reason is that each local computation weights needs to each other, but still dividing two groups works well. The last one is a flat supply chain. So as this actually shows grows quadratic, and this is the strong evidence that running one large secure multi-party computation increase the impact of the reduce the performance of the system. So from the this diagram, we can conclude that our approach at least as good as the direct application of supply chain, and in most cases, as one level supply chain is a rare exception, flat supply chain is a rare exception. We expect that our approach in most cases result in increases performance and also provide additional security properties. Oops. Where we came. Can we go back? Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So our approach is more generic, actually. It is not just used for, can be used for LCA, but also it can be used business processes that including collaborative computations. So our second case study is the lead time computation and optimization. In supply chain management, lead time is the time for receiving a customer order to delivering the getting the ready to deliver. But as companies want to have design supply network assuring that shorter lead time, they need to collaborate and also share their information with other partners or a third-party company. But they are concerned of their information. Therefore, with our approach, we can provide more secure computation. And also, I'm looking for other application areas. If you think that your problem can be solved by this approach, please contact with me. And the key takeaways from my talk that sharing data is desirable for LCA and also for other collaborative computations, but they need to be protected. And for more accurate results, actual data should come from sensors, but we need to provide infrastructure and technologies that secure these computations and this getting this inputs securely. Secure multi-party computation does not need to be slow. If you do it naively, of course, it does not scale and it takes maybe days or months to do joint computation. But if we do it more cleverly and localize the computation, it is what I am doing in my PhD, we can bring down the time measured in days to measured in minutes. So as I said before, the approach can be applied to other application areas that requires secure collaborative computations. Thank you for listening.
Morning, everyone. We all getting a bit hungry, are we? Ready for lunch? So I got 3 bits of advice. If you come to a security conference, don't turn on your laptop, don't turn on your phone, and don't use the clicker. Right, so I'm just going to nod my head. I'm not going to use the clicker. I haven't got my phone because I don't want to spend the next 2 weeks someone in here trying to hack my account because I've stood up here in front of everybody. Yeah. All right. So that's always so it's a great honor to be here, but please don't do any of that, please. Right. So while we need to go back a couple of slides, I think that's the last one. Yeah. So I'm Mark Craddock. I'm glad to be here. So my experience is, working with the UN, working across government, Houses of Parliament. Next slide, please. You can find me on Twitter. So I've done a lot of work across, government involving security. We set up the G-Cloud framework, which is a cloud framework for government to buy cloud services. So across the public sector, they spent over £10 billion on cloud. And there's always lots of security work associated with that. I've worked at the United Nations House of Parliament, generally working on cloud systems, big data, analytics, and kind of security. And most recently, I put in built the big data platform for the UN, and that actually saved the UK economy 12 billion. But that's a separate presentation. That's online somewhere. If you just search for that, you'll find it. Yeah. So next slide, please. So as part of the UN, the big data platform, there was this vision of sharing and collaborating of data to create better lives. So if we get data from different places, instead of creating profiles of people on social media and then using that to make money, we can actually use that data to make better lives. So we can understand some good uses of mobile phone data, for example, is on population statistics migration. So we know people being displaced from the Ukraine, for example, they all have mobile phones. They're just like me and you, yeah, and they've been displaced because of the war. But they've got their phones and they're moving around. And if you analyze that data, you can identify how many people are moving, where they're going to, and then where you can put those appropriate services in place to support those people. So next slide, please. So as part of the UN work on big data, there's 194 countries around the world. We all work on kind of data and statistics, and there's a general kind of pipeline where you get some data, you do some analytics on it, and then you produce an output, which is usually a number. Yeah. So and that involves, that's a very simple view of the pipeline. There could be 100 steps in that. There could be spreadsheets involved, and there could be hundreds of different sources of data to produce those statistics. For example, the pricing index we have in the UK, I think it's over 1 million lines of code, and it's sources of data from all over the place. So if you look at ONS, I think they publicly list the sources of data they get into their systems. There's over 180 different sources from the HMRC, different business accounts, corporates, all sorts of data to produce these statistics that we rely on. Next slide, please. And one of the biggest problems of that is getting access to that data to actually make those decisions and get to make better lives, and also to improve services. So as part of building that platform, we use something called rewarding mapping. So that's a way of doing value chains and understanding the evolution of technology, and that helps you make the better decisions about which products to buy, services to buy, which components are in your architecture, and also the platform design toolkit, which helps you build a kind of platform. So next slide, please. So there's many. I've done many presentations out there as well. Now this is a rewarding map. It's a really old one. But I guess the important bit is down in the kind of bottom left-hand corner, it talks about multi-party computation and homomorphic encryption. And when we look at rewarding maps, on the left-hand side in the Genesis, this is the kind of new and novel, it hasn't been done before, stuff you can kind of generally patent, and it's prone to failure. You may try it 9 times, one time it works. On the right-hand side, we have the commodity and utility. So, water, electricity, you generally pay for it as a service. And you buy with your credit card, and it's easy to consume. And in the middle, we have these custom built and product types of technology. And technology moves from left to right, and there is no choice on evolution. It always moves left to right. Yeah, so there is no choice. So we know when we map our components, we know that multi-party computation at some point in the future, will be a service or a commodity, and we know homomorphic encryption will be a product or a service and a commodity. So as part of this work and part of the UN, next slide, please, we looked at these cryptographic techniques and how can we use them to get access to data sources so that we can combine them and then produce better statistics and help improve lives. So there's various different, I say, new cryptographic techniques, but they're not new. They've been around for a long time. And they're generally in the kind of universities now, and they're coming out into kind of products now and moving that product space. But if you're going to do this kind of stuff, you're generally going to kind of custom build it. You've got to build it yourself. You've got to write some code. And, there's multi-party computation, fully homomorphic encryption, zero knowledge proofs. And basically, we looked at that. I set up a privacy group in the UN. We got all the experts from around the world, and we looked at these techniques and technologies. Next slide, please. And we produced some handbooks from the UN. So there's, if you want to look at this in a lot more detail, there's some handbooks we produced on, using these privacy techniques, and also how we used Wardy mapping to do the strategy for these kind of things as well. So next slide. Now, this is a Wardy map looking at those cryptographic techniques. So on the left-hand side, it's kind of new and novel. On the right-hand side, it's kind of well-known, well understood. And you can see the kind of zero-knowledge proofs, homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation is on the kind of left-hand side in the kind of custom build. So if you want to do these things, you have to build them yourself. So that's also a challenge and also an advantage. So if you're a startup, this is your IP, this is the stuff no one else is doing, this is what you can sell to other people. Yeah, this is what you can do. If you want to use those technologies, then you're going to have to, it's difficult to find it because you can't really buy it, you're going to have to build it yourself. So you have to it's kind of, I guess, a yin and yang, kind of problem. And we can see that, these techniques moving over the left-hand side. So if you look at the next slide, please. So this is specifically about multi-party computation, and we've got various components in that. So we look at the kind of trust of multi-party. In this context of this map, it was around the trust. So on the right-hand side, we got our NPC scientists, and they absolutely trust it if they think it's the best thing since sliced bread. And on the left-hand side, we got our national statistic offices, and it's an evil technology, and, we'd rather use spreadsheets. Yeah? And in the middle, you can see, we know the military, we know the intelligence services are using it, and we know there's commercial vendors kind of developing these products. So one example of multi-party computation is there's lots of satellites flying around in the air. You don't want them to crash into each other, but you don't want the other person to know where your satellite is. So using multi-party computation, you can do a calculation to predict if they're going to crash or not, but you don't have to actually share the location of those satellites. So multi-party computation allows you to take data in encrypted form and still do calculations on that data while it's encrypted. So it solves a lot of challenges around, social media potentially, criminal data. It can also make challenges as well, because then you can actually, you're working with encrypted data, not kind of open data. So we can see that there's an element of trust there. We know different people are using it, and most of them are custom building it, but we can see there's kind of products and services coming out, and we can see the work that's been done. That there's research and there's products and there's stuff to be developed coming. So that's kind of your, if you're going to build a product, you're a startup, you want to look at this kind of IP. So we've got these cryptographic techniques. We know they're going to be industrialized. We're not moving left to right, and as part of this, we said, we did this 3 years ago, I think it was. We said, the programming environments need to move left to right because it's really difficult. You've got to be an expert. You've got to have a PhD in maths, and you've got to be able to write really good code to do this stuff. And there are not many people around that can do that. And we know, the installation tools and the configuration is extremely difficult. So that needs to be more industrialized and changed into products in the commodity phase. And we know, like, the libraries that we use for this stuff it's not, you can't, if you want to go and build, you may even have to go and build your own libraries to do this from scratch. So we said, this is what we need to do. We need to make sure these libraries are in place. We need the vendors to do this. And we shared this openly. And on the next slide, we can say who's using MPC, FHE and differential privacy. So the UN now, I set up the original task force. Now there's a privacy lab where the UN can experiment with these techniques, and from statistical and also other uses. We know Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Alibaba, IBM, Facebook, and many others are doing research and development in these technologies. Yeah, these cryptographic technologies, and you just go on Google, you'll find people doing this. We know the MPC, there's an alliance. So there's a group of maybe 30 or 40 companies now that are all working on, MPC together and, looking at standards and looking at how they can drive this technology forward. We know the fully homomorphic encryption, there's a standards group. So again, they're looking at these kind of techniques and how do they make it more widely available? How do they recruit the staff? Maybe the challenge is not actually recruiting the staff, is to make it easier for people to do that development. So making the libraries available and the compilers. So we see the IEEE, they're even starting looking at standards for this now. So it's getting more out of that kind of custom built stuff, maybe moving into products. People are kind of looking at this, taking this more seriously as a technique. We can see the US Census, that they're using differential privacy now. So differential privacy allows, so if we took everybody's height in the room and we got an average height, if we use differential privacy, we would get everybody's height, but it would be slightly, there would be a little bit of noise in that data, but the answer we get would still be the correct average height. So that means if your data on your height gets shared, it's not your height, so it can't be linked to you, so it protects your privacy and your information. So this is what's happening with the census. So in the census 2010 in the US, I think they've produced a report and they did some research and they were able to identify more than 60 or 70% of the individuals by linking it to other data sets. So what they're doing with the census from 2020 is using differential privacy. So they have that kind of little bit of noise, but you can still do your statistical calculations on the census data, but it should protect people's privacy because you can't really link it to an individual because it's maybe not your height or your area, or your location, or your age, or it's slightly different. But if you do your aggregate statistics, they still make sense. So you can still do that for funding and how much money do the government invest in this region, in this town, in this city, and all that kind of stuff. Meta, Facebook, so they've had some trouble with privacy, so they are looking at this seriously. Yeah, they've poached. They've recruited some of the top people that were doing this at Microsoft, and they're quite open to what we're doing with it. So there are a couple of links there for MPC and differential privacy. So they're looking at it, using it to collect data on individuals, and then use that for marketing purposes. But in this case, it won't be your height; it'll be an encrypted version of your height, and no one knows what that is. But you can still do. I still want to sell, clothes to tall people, but I don't know who those people are and I don't know how tall they are. I just know the ad's going to go out, kind of thing. Yeah. But there's links to documents and papers there from Facebook on what they're doing in MPC. So there's a huge amount of opportunity for MPC, but it is very specialist. So you need to be a good program, and you need a PhD in maths and cryptography. So there's lots of opportunity, and you'll see all these people, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, they recruit from the universities. So if we look at the kind of next slide, these are the people that are doing MPC. So these are companies that are building and releasing products. So there's quite a few. They're all part of the MPC Alliance. There are others that aren't part of the MPC Alliance. And you've got Bosch. Lots of them are small startups. And they're looking at ways of sharing and allowing you to encrypt data and, do analytics on data without this, breaking people's privacy or privacy of other data. So it could be your, accounts. It could be data on, pipelines. I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah. So you can use these techniques to encrypt data and still do calculations on that data without decrypting it. So it sounds like magic, and it kind of is. Technically, it's not actually encryption, but that's for another session, isn't it? So next slide, please. So fully homomorphic encryption. So these are all the people in the industry that are looking at it and using it. I think Microsoft even offers a service built around homomorphic encryption now. LinkedIn's using it. Alibaba. It's not just for the West. It's the East as well. We got the governments looking at it. The United Nations. We've got academia. And I don't see anybody from the Southwest there, but maybe they need to sign up and join the group. Yeah. So next slide, please. How much time have I got left, actually?
About now, Mark.
About now, yeah. So what's next? So if you look at these techniques of differential privacy, fully homomorphic encryption, and multi-party computation, if you can take data and you can encrypt it and you can do analytics on it, you can also build machine learning models. So there's a thing called federated learning. So you got Google, you got Microsoft, you got IBM, you got Facebook. They're all looking at using these techniques now to actually take data, encrypted data, and then start building encrypted AI models, machine learning models using this technique. So there's loads of links to that. And I think, is there one more slide? I can't remember. Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much.